Hello and welcome on Primetime Watchmaking in the News. Welcome at the Watchers Club, and September for sure has reserved us with some pretty interesting surprises on the business side of things, but also with some interesting new watches, MB&F, Urberg, HYT, Vacheron Constantin, and a bit more surprisingly, Apple and a Rolex Tourbillon. Okay, so let's start, hang in there. And first, I just wanted to quickly apologize because I really wanted to do a special video explaining what the Watchers Club concept will be. But simply, we didn't have the time to do so, a little personal family matter to take care of. And I'm a bit juggling as best as I can, but soon we will do so because yes, this club thing really represents an important milestone for us and hopefully for you too. Okay, now for some serious business news, because it has very recently been announced that one of watchmaking's greats will be stepping down from all operational roles he was overseeing. And some of you guessed it, but I'm talking about Mr. Jean-Claude Biver, the man currently at the helm of the LVMH Group's watchmaking division, meaning Hublot, Tag Heuer and Zenith, a man who was key in making what mechanical watchmaking is today in terms of business and respect, and following what I introduced a few months ago with this idea of the Hall of Fame of watchmaking, well, I can easily assert that Mr. Biver has of course a well-deserved place in this one. So I just wanted to say a few words about the man because yes, his role has been fundamental, and you might love or hate the guy, but one has to acknowledge that his business vision has had a massive impact for the industry as a whole. You've already heard the story, but you have to remember that mechanical watchmaking was almost totally lost after the crisis, the quartz crisis of the mid-70s, early 80s, and by relaunching Blancpain in 1983 was for sure some kind of gamble, but also his first demonstration of his marketing capabilities. Mr. Jean-Claude Biver, or JCB as some people refer him to, well, he's no watchmaker, he's no technician, designer, etc. He's a marketing man, a super talented marketing man who rapidly understood that with some very clever claims and ideas, he could bring back some hype in something that was considered totally passé, outdated, unmeaningful, with no future at all, and he literally overturned all these arguments by 180 degrees and managed to change the attitude and perception of the consumers. Mechanical watchmaking still had a purpose, a reason of being, a substance, and a cool factor. In a certain way, one sentence relaunched everything. Since 1735, there has never been a quartz Blancpain, and there will never be. And this kind of symbolizes pretty well Mr. Biver's touch. Blancpain hasn't made watches uninterrupted since 1735, but this little historical loophole didn't really matter. What mattered was the message such a sentence conveyed, also opposing quartz developments by all the other brands to this rather daring strategy, and it worked. There were obviously a few watch brands that still produced mechanical watches in the 80s, but he and his team managed to take the full credit of this revival, something that naturally didn't go unnoticed and ultimately got the Swatch Group to acquire Blancpain and placed Mr. Biver in a new role and redevelop Omega, which had been a bit struggling over the years, and yet another success. Of course, and for those who know him, Mr. Biver is rather flamboyant and a pretty loud person, a real character. He draws a lot of attention.
Never ever scratch, never ever oxidize, as new. Mathematic formula.
Wow, Mr. Biver, you're so strong.
If you see what I mean. Well, finally, this led him to leave the Swatch Group and take a new challenge, a more entrepreneurial one, when he got the opportunity of becoming a direct stakeholder of Hublot, a fairly recent brand which wasn't particularly doing so well. And with his marketing genius, he did what it took to come up with products that consumers wanted. And this is really, for me, his biggest talent. He is in tune with what the market wants. He can anticipate and be opportunistic, whether on the product side, but also how to communicate this, and this is really what makes him so successful. But nothing is that easy. Anyone that has worked and collaborated with him will tell you how much of a hard worker he is, how dedicated to his mission the man is, coming to the office super early every morning, traveling the world like a madman, and this up to this day. So yes, some people will say that the Hublot Big Bang has nothing original, that is really Royal Oak inspired, that the spirit of Big Bang is Richard Mille inspired, and not too difficult not to argue with all this, but he nevertheless got over all this by proving that commercially speaking, the consumers were following what Hublot stood for them, and this naturally helped by some very successful and again, often very opportunistic marketing campaigns. Remember when Formula One ex-Supremo Bernie Ecclestone got mugged in London and got his Hublot stolen from him, well, Mr. Beaver just took this as a great opportunity to demonstrate what people were willing to go through to get a big bang. I mean, this of course could be seen as a bit shocking, but it definitely worked in terms of getting some publicity and awareness. I mean, think also of when Hublot first started to get involved in football, a sport really looked down by all luxury brands at the time, and look at the visibility Hublot got during the last World Cup in Russia. It was really crazy. I mean, Hublot everywhere, on the field, on the wrist of coaches, players, not to mention the referees. Well, these are just examples and makes you understand why luxury power group LVMH bought the brand some years ago and making Mr. Beaver slightly wealthier in the process. But Mr. Beaver could have nicely retired, take advantage of all this. He had already totally proven his talents, but no, he is a man dedicated to the business of mechanical watchmaking and still had things to prove. And therefore took the helm of the LVMH watchmaking division, became this kind of ad interim CEO of TAG Heuer first, then Zenith, and tried to apply his touch and recipes on these brands. I mean, with TAG Heuer, and in a certain way, it wasn't too difficult to reposition the brand where it always should have been. I mean, meaning this entry-level luxury brand instead of trying to compete with Rolex, and at the same time be seen as a fine watchmaking brand with a bit unnecessary complication developments. I mean, those complications achievements are really fine to demonstrate the avant-garde dimension of the brand. I mean, TAG, T-A-G, does stand for Technique d'Avant-Garde, but fine as concept watches, like you have incredible concept cars, but to commercially compete on that segment is yet another ball game, and diluted what TAG Heuer meant for many consumers, and confused things more than anything else, I think. So Mr. Beaver recentered the product offering, also by going full on with vintage-inspired models, and this worked pretty well. But it didn't prevent the brand to come up with the first real smartwatch proposed by a historic name of watchmaking. Personally, I think that they are entitled to do so. It's not shocking for me, again, this avant-garde dimension, especially at a time when most Swiss management teams were kind of refusing to admit that smartwatches represented a very serious alternative to traditional mechanical watchmaking for many consumers. But something very clever Mr. Beaver said was that if it kept the habit for young consumers of wearing something on their wrist, well, this was a good thing, as one day they will want and desire something more meaningful. But I will come back to this a bit later in this prime time, because we might have touched the limit of this argument. The smart thing he also did at the launch of this TAG Heuer smartwatch was that you could trade it in for a mechanical watch in the future, so not closing the door of the type of watches we like. Anyhow, after having taken care of TAG Heuer, Mr. Beaver took the mission of helping out the struggling Zenith brand, a real legitimate play of the industry with its very rich history and some very iconic movements, such as the legendary El Primero. He placed a new CEO there, Mr. Julien Tornard, but he was still very much operationally involved, and something that needs to be said is that Mr. Beaver has a pretty close guard around him that followed him on many of his various endeavors. People of trust, of course, that could follow this man's incredible energy. Well, these days are coming to an end, and Mr. Beaver will step down by the end of the year from all his operational roles and will remain as a non-executive member of LVMH watchmaking division. So the first noticeable change will concern TAG Heuer, where the son of LVMH president and owner, Mr. Bernard Arnault, will now take a much more influential role in the management and destiny of the brand. So this man is young, 23, he's talented, very clever, and basically this is his company. So the watchmaking division will now be overseen by a new boss, Mr. Stéphane Bianchi, coming from the LVMH group and former head of Yves Rocher, a cosmetic company part of the myriad of luxury brands controlled by LVMH. This will naturally lead to some other changes, probably some very significant ones, and we will naturally keep you posted on this, and I'm pretty sure things will move quite fast to mark the end of this kind of GCB era. So all the best to Mr. Beaver. Thanks for what you've done, but I'm also pretty sure we will see you again. I don't think he's the type of guy that will only play golf from now on. And despite having gone through some pretty serious health issues, which also had an impact on what is going on right now, well, I'm pretty convinced that his role in defining the future of mechanical watchmaking is far from over. And actually, I really think that it would be interesting to do a much more in-depth portrait of Mr. Beaver, his career and achievements, because like I said, he definitely deserves to be in this Hall of Fame of watchmaking. Okay, and now for some other important and shocking news, as both Audemars Piguet and Richard Mille just announced that they will pull out of the SIHH. Not for the following 2019 edition, but as of 2020. Both brands will be out of the prestigious Geneva event. So remember when I talked about the pull out of the entire Swatch Group from Baselworld for next year's edition? Well, I did mention that it was not because Baselworld is facing some pretty serious and structural challenges that the SIHH should boast too much on its apparent success. Things could change, and they have. So what does it tell us when one of the founding brands of the SIHH is walking away? Well, it first reflects the changes occurring on the distribution and retail side of the business, as both brands have made it pretty clear that they are internalizing as much as possible the final point of contact with their end customers. Richard Mille only has a few retailers left throughout the world, and today if you want to buy a RM watch, well, you have to go to one of their boutiques, and generally they are very nice, but that can or should be expected. So Richard Mille watches are hot commodity, and with a production of only 4,000 pieces per year approximately, it's just normal for them to supply their own boutique first. Of course, it's a way of keeping a big chunk of the money, which used to go in the retailer's pocket, but it's also, and very importantly, a way of keeping full control over the customer experience and nurture it, something which is precisely one of the main strengths of Richard Mille. You are part of a club, and the RM team is really super good at this, not to mention Richard Mille himself. So for Audemars Piguet, the strategy is the same. It doesn't want to produce more watches. It already produces 10 times more watches than Richard Mille, so approximately 40,000. But the most obvious way of growing the business without diluting the sexiness of the brand by overflowing markets is also to internalize the retail side of things. Keep the margin, and we're talking a lot of money here considering the volume. So when you don't need retailers anymore, well, it simply doesn't make sense to spend millions and millions. A show like the SIHH will actually cost you. They have the money, I mean, you don't have to worry about that, but it's also a question of sending a pretty strong signal, a way of demonstrating their power, a way of differentiating them even more from the rest. So of course the SIHH doesn't resume itself to this trade dimension, though it's, let's not be naive, and business done there is very important, but it's also a very efficient communication platform. I mean, selected journalists from all over the world are flown in to follow the brand's press conferences and novelties presented there, but brands now tend to show less and less new watches during the salon and prefer to spread them out throughout the year, which of course again makes sense. So for many brands of the SIHH, this communication dimension represents a very serious opportunity, but for brands as hot as Richard Mille and Audemars Piguet, well, they get the huge coverage regardless, so they don't really need this as much as other more discreet brands. Well, this will leave some available space, and we also know that some other smaller independent brands are also kind of questioning their presence there. So the soap opera is far from over. Will some Baselworld brands want to rejoin the SIHH? Will the SIHH be more flexible in accepting them? Well, we'll see in the coming months. And on the Baselworld side, we've also learned that the brand Raymond Weil will no longer attend. Not that it will totally change my life, but just a little update. Okay, before talking new watches, I also wanted to share with you that Chanel, the French super luxury brand, mostly known for bags and perfume by the general public, well, Chanel has just taken a 20% minority stake in François Paul Journe, one of the best and most successful independent watch brand of the last 30 years. A brand with a strong identity, with, highly recognizable timepieces, and the level of refinement of their movements, is really way up there, and a brand that stuck to its promises, producing approximately the same number of watches years after years based on its production capabilities of around 900 pieces per year. So this investment will for sure give François Paul Journe a bit of additional means to solidify its strategy and presence, and for Chanel it just demonstrates again their will of sticking with the really super high-end players of the industry. Recently they had also invested some money into Romain Gaultier, the great but small independent brand with its own production capabilities from the Vallée de Joux, and also with their very own name. Because Chanel is also concentrating on raising their game with really beautiful, super high-end products seen these past few years. Okay, so let's now quickly come back on the main product launches of the month, and we will start with MB&F, who introduced the horological machine number 9, the HM9, with its twin balance wheel and differential movement, another one of these really different type of timepieces, and I fully understand that it might not correspond to everyone's liking, but you have to salute the audacity and the fantastic architecture of the movement. And as one of you mentioned in the comments, this would be really cool in the all-transparent case, but can't imagine how difficult this would take to machine it. Urwerk also came out with a pretty exciting timepiece with the UR111C 111, and this is clearly a little bit frustrating for me because of what has happened on my personal side. Well, this is clearly something I didn't have time to properly take care of, and we will therefore have to content ourselves with the pretty ambitious film Urwerk shared with us regarding this new piece. So I really hope that we'll soon be able to come back on this, because I know this timepiece really represents something very important and special for the brand, and I simply want to see this thing in real. So hopefully very soon we'll have something a bit more in-depth to share with you. HYT came with a new version of their skull model, and this time playing with the matching colors of the fluid indicating the time and the skull itself on the dial side. So you have 3 versions coming in green, blue and red, each limited to 50 pieces, and this watch is now slightly smaller than the original skull, having shrunk from 51 to 49 millimeters. So still quite big, on a big piece on the wrist, but I guess, I mean, if you wear something like this, well, you don't really mind getting noticed. And though I'm a bit tired of skull-inspired watches, I must say that I quite like the idea that you won't find a minute indicator on this watch. You have to kind of guess this depending on where the fluid is, and since the capillary has this kind of strange shape, well, it makes it even harder. So quite a bit useless if you want to boil your eggs precisely, but pretty cool nevertheless. Very recently I was invited in Paris for a pretty fancy event held by Bucher. That's the Swiss retailer who has gone through some serious business development over the recent years, taking over, for instance, Tourneau in the US, the Watch Gallery in the UK. Well, they have made a specialty of introducing limited edition models, taking their distinctive blue corporate color as the common denominator of these watches seen on their dials. So just now they came up with a new series of 3 timepieces produced in partnership with Vacheron Constantin. These watches all come in the Traditionnel collection of the brand, with a limited to 3 pieces tourbillon model and the brand's famous 14-day power reserve movement. There's also a more traditional Traditionnel model. Yeah, I know that was kind of easy. This one is coming with hour and minute and a small second indicator at 9 o'clock, and a smaller woman version, naturally gem set. And all 3 watches come in big gold cases, and the combination with this blue color really works. So Bucher will continue to produce such limited edition with most of their the brands they carry in their boutique, and they've already produced no less than 22 other models. Okay, now I will most probably surprise you, because I'm going to talk about the recently unveiled Apple Watch 4. Yeah, you heard me right. But the reason I will do so is not to make some kind of product review, but what doors this new model opens and actually the threat it represents. So for many, smartwatches are seen as cool little gadgets aimed at the younger generation. I'm also a bit of a tech gadget freak, but for the time being I have not succumbed to any smart watches. But this new Apple Watch goes far beyond the gadget status. You now have some pretty serious health-related functions which should appeal to yet another expanding customer base, and by this I mean older generation type of customers. This generation is still a prime target, if I may say this like this, for many luxury brands. And if now this generation would start buying massively Apple Watches too, because simply it could save lives, well, this is one heck of a sales argument and will most probably have an impact on some purchasing behavior. Reason why it is so vital for watch brands to do what it takes to become relevant to younger generation. And personally, I'm not a big believer that people will wear both at the same time. I mean, I don't think that works. Okay, last product-related news, and this is also quite surprising because here you have the first tourbillon Rolex watch I have ever seen. Okay, Rolex didn't make it, and I'm actually very glad they didn't. And this very special Milgauss comes from a small Geneva lab called La Belle Noire, specialized in timepiece customization, mainly Rolexes, but also APs and Panerais, among others. So they retrofitted the original movement with a tourbillon and also worked on the case dial with this dark gray matte aspect, and I must say it feels pretty weird. This is quite an oddity. It's not a commercial project, but just some kind of crazy experience to show up to where they can go with this personalization skills. And I believe this is quite well demonstrated here because the integration and finishing is seriously interesting. So coming back on why I said I was glad it didn't come from Rolex, well, I'm sure that for many brands the temptation of widening their product lines with complication was kind of an easy strategy, but what has this resulted resulted into, for me, a dilution of the brand message and an unnecessary complicated product offering for the consumer, where every brand ultimately presents the same thing. Does every brand need to come up with tourbillons and minute repeaters? Well, I don't think so. And this is again one of the reasons I respect a lot the Big Crown. They stick with their mission, a clear identity, and look at the success today. Okay, that was just some food for thoughts, and please don't hesitate to share your views on the matter. And now for what to expect in October. Well, if you're in Mexico, I clearly invite you to attend the CIAR. Would have loved to go there myself, but a bit complicated at the moment. This very cool event will take place at the St. Regis Hotel in Mexico City between the 16th and 18th of October, and approximately 30 brands will be there showcasing their timepieces, and often you will also have some premieres unveiled during the show. So enjoy this, and this time I think I'm kind of entitled to say, Viva Mexico! Okay, and in New York on Friday the 26th and Saturday the 27th, you will be able to attend Watch Time New York, the show organized by the eponymous US Watch magazine, and this will take place at the Gotham Hall in the heart of Manhattan. Also, approximately 30 brands present there. Okay, now it's soon over, and I just wanted to thank you for the really great feedback we received after our latest A. Lange & Söhne walkthrough video. We're super delighted, and going by this, well, I am totally convinced that we need to do more of these extra long reports. I just love doing them, and we have plenty of things to discover together. And just as a little auto-promotion, just wanted to share with you that I got interviewed the other day by the Swiss German TV, who were really interested in what we are doing with the club, and in particular with our watch tripping experiences. So that was cool and interesting, not to be interviewing, but to be interviewed, and just shows that these watch tripping things are really going somewhere. Okay, now it's over. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to our great patrons, and I promise to get back to you with all the details on the evolution of our Patreon club initiative soon. I just need to prioritize a few things, and will do my best. So all the best, see you real soon, and viva watchmaking!